Are in chapter 3. If you remember, oh no, I didn't bring my markers. If you remember, we started this thing off. Remember that Ecclesiastes is wisdom literature, and by that it means the 5 books of Job, Psalms, Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, and the Song of Solomon all have a different purpose in mind than many of the other books of the Bible. The purpose is that we can get a glimpse into the mind of God. What is God thinking? What does he consider important? What does he consider not so important? What really pleases the Lord? What really doesn't please the Lord? You read a book like Job and it seems like, oh, what a disaster this is. But when you look at the man himself and the character which he reinforces of this divine belief, this blind trust, this childlike faith, despite the circumstance around him, at the end of that book, he comes out looking pretty darn good. And you look at that guy and you go, wow, I wish I had that kind of patience. And not just patience. I mean, you always hear the phrase, the patience of Job. The fortitude of Job.
Yes.
That guy was huge.
Yes.
It was huge, the way he stayed steadfastly turning, I think of what Paul says, turning neither to the left or to the right. That was Job, singular focused, myopic, author, finisher of the faith, don't deviate from it. Despite his wife was nagging him, just curse God and die, great. His priest guys, 3 of them came and nagged him and said, just curse God and die, just give it up. And he wouldn't do it. Well, what can you garner from that kind of character representation? What pleases God? Well, first and foremost, I think steadfast faithfulness.
Yes.
Set God as a priority. Thanks, Roger. Steadfast faithfulness. Set God as a priority. Keep God as a priority. Sometimes it's fun to be a God guy because everybody's a God guy. But what about over here when this bunch of people that aren't God guys? Then, we kind of clam up a little and get quiet. Now, I'm not saying grab a big wooden cross and walk down the street and yell, Jesus is coming. Y'all are going to die on every corner. But I am talking about being faithful and honest and kind and good, gentle, all those great things he taught us all the time. And it's not easy to do. It's not for any of us, especially me. When I get behind the wheel of a car, then suddenly I see all the evil in the world. And I want to run over it. Especially little old ladies in the left lane, Barbara. I'm not mentioning any names. But this is what the wisdom literature is all about. We get to see the elements of God and how they can play themselves out in our lives. What, me and the character of God? Well, yeah. It's no accident. Jesus said, become Christ-like. Paul said, become Christ-like. Become all things old passed away, all things made new. Walk forth in the holiness of God. Be holy, for he is holy. Well, there's an old cliche. What does that mean? Well, that means read the wisdom literature and try somewhere amongst those 5 books to catch a clue about how God feels about stuff. We always focus on how we feel about stuff. Why don't we focus on what God would like? All right, well, that's Ecclesiastes. Here we have a guy. Some say he's a king, some say he's a priest, some say he's Solomon. It doesn't really matter. It's the character that we're looking at. And he is a man who, has a longing in his life, right? There's something there. There's a void. There's an emptiness that he can't seem to fill on his own effort. He tries. Remember, he goes after the riches. He goes after the women, all the women. He goes after the wine and song. He goes after the property and possessions. He just buys everything. He goes after the power and the armies and the strength. He tries everything to fill that emptiness, that void. And yet something's missing. So what does he do when he can't find that longing? What does he do? Well, he does what all of us Americans do. This is his longing right here. His restlessness, if you will. He can't figure it out. He doesn't know what it is, but it is smack in the middle of him. And not only is it in the middle of him, I don't know how to do this. Whoops. Audio visual was really never one of my big things. This is him right here. I'll make him like a snowman. Now he's a platypus. Anyway, this is him. This is Mr. Ecclesiasticus. He's got a longing in here that he can't seem to fill. It's empty and it's killing him. So he reaches out in all the ways he knows of, like I said, power and possession and women. Hey guys, come on in. Right on time.
Thank you.
You set your watch according to Chuck back there. It's the one with the little ears on it. And riches. He tries everything and he strikes out on every front. So what happens? This is trying to define this man. This is where he's seeking the answers to fill that emptiness inside, and he strikes out on every front. So what happens to this guy? Do you guys read this at all?
You mean Ecclesiastes?
Yeah. What happens to Ecclesiasticus? What does he do that's stupid?
Well, in chapter 3, he's considering everything.
Well, no, actually, chapter 3, he's kind of, this is where we are today.
Yes.
He's kind of imploding.
Yeah, he says he hates his life. And
Hates his life. I wish I was never born. Kind of a Voltaire kind of thing, you know. Voltaire stood so young, as a young man, so strong and assured. He said, give me 100 men in 10 years and I'll put an end to Christianity. I will destroy Jesus Christ on this earth. That was his boast. The last word he said before dying is, I wish I had never been born. I hate my life. I wish I'd never been born. Well, welcome to chapter 3 of Ecclesiastes. A few 100,000 years before Voltaire ever got hold of it. What happens when we can't fill our longing, when we can't satiate our sensual desires? And that's what we are. We're all sensory people. We touch, we see, we hear, we smell, we taste. We define things by the senses. That's hard. I'm not going to try and chew that. You know, an apple over here, that's soft. I can chew that. You know, this is good to eat. This, you know, it doesn't have much taste. And we define our world in those 5 properties. What's good because I say it's good. What's not so good to eat because I say it's not so good. Well, I'm Lord of my kingdom, aren't I? But what happens when we can't define it? We try, we make the effort, we spend the money, invest the time, and it doesn't do. So what do? We abandon it. We throw it out the window. And sadly, this is where a lot of Christians are in their lives. They go to the Billy Graham thing, they throw themselves at the altar, they cry, they weep, they do the whole 9 things, forgive me, Lord, and they sing over them, anoint them, and heal them, and lay hands on them, and bribe over them a couple of times, and send them home, and nothing changes. They get home, they went through all the motions, they went through all the mechanics, but that's not what Christianity is about. That's not what God, a relationship with God is about. You two don't have a relationship, at least I hope you do, have a relationship just based on, well, you're a female, you're a male, you go out and win, you do this, and what is traditionally defined by us as a good relationship. There's something greater there. We call it love. What is love? Well, love lets you stay around even though she's mean.
Or vice versa.
And, love lets you stay around even though he's got that big ugly thing on his shoulder there. Love is what sees their partner through even in the hospital bed or stands beside them in their last few moments on this earth. Love is what rejoices when their partner is successful and does a good job at something. Love is what you sacrifice and give up for that child that never seems to appreciate anything.
Yes.
But you give it anyway and you sacrifice it. That's what love is. You know what love is? As Paul says it in, 1 Corinthians 13, love is not identified by anything that we rule over. There are no rules over love. There's no rules over hope. Because why? Well, true love, and what we're talking about is agape. That big fancy Greek word that we all like to write. God is love. Oops, sorry. Not vav, love. God is love. And it's this love that He passes down to fill our longing and that character. This is exactly what God meant when He said, you will not rest until you rest in me. It's not that you might not rest. God puts a strong requirement. You will not rest. Not ever until you rest in me. You want to love your wife? You will never truly, truly love your wife until you love her in my character. What is God's character? Read the Bible, for crying out loud. The sacrifice of God, His own Son, the whole 9 yards, the whole Christmas thing, we're going to talk about that a little bit in the sermon this morning. But what is, and Paul tries to measure it. He tries to measure the power and compassion and mercy and forgiveness of God. And he comes to the point to where he says, I just can't do it. The compassion of God that passes the infinite wisdom of God which passes this of God which passes my everything. He even prays for his other churches. He says, I wish you could know the height, the depth, the width, the power, the comfort of the Lord God. But he finally gets to the place where he says, I don't think that's possible. This side of heaven. Now, what governs it on the other side? Don't know. Not there yet. But we can know enough to put the lions at bay. Just like Daniel standing in the midst of all that would destroy him, and he doesn't care. Or Job standing in the midst of all that would destroy him, and he doesn't care. And what did God say about Daniel? What did God say about Job? Look into those men in the lives, not their successes, but to their character. You know, I'm reminded of a story. Sister Teresa, when the heads of state all gathered to hear her speak, and she spoke of the hardships and just the heart-wrenching losses and failures that she experiences day after day after day after day. And at the end, a head of state came up and said, doesn't it hurt you to give your whole life, invest your whole life to a ministry without success? And her answer was, God didn't call me to a ministry of success. He called me to a ministry of compassion. He called me to a ministry of love, to extend His love through me to whoever's sitting in front of me dying. Will they die? Yes, often they do. But as long as they have breath, I will praise God with them and for them. And they will not be alone. God didn't know how to handle that answer. What do you mean you're not called to a ministry of success? We need bigger buildings. We need more men, more women, more numbers. We need buses with our name on them, for crying out loud. No, I need to teach Barbara that she's not walking this earth alone. I need to teach Barbara that regardless of that bad attitude of hers, God still loves her anyway. Wink, wink. I'm trying to put up with you, but God loves you.
But she learns through his attitude and his anger and...
You're going to be Jobette. I'm messing with you, Barbara. I told you don't sit on the front row. These two are too new. I can't pick on them yet. So what you do in God is no small thing. But what you do not yet in God, like look here and here and here and here, that's not unexpected. Most people do. They go to what they know. But when this doesn't work, and this alone is still eating away at you, don't bail. Don't implode. Don't say, This is ridiculous. You know, back in the 70s, for those of you who are old enough to know this, and yes, I am old enough to know this, I was there in my long hair and my tie-dye shirts, listening to, you know, Three Dog Night and Led Zeppelin. There was a young man in the Byrds called Neil Young who wrote a song, and they titled it Turn, Turn, Turn. You remember that song? A time for this, a time.
Neil wrote that one?
Yeah.
Okay.
And they made it famous. It was a great hippie song back in the 60s and 70s. I mean, it played forever. He stole it right out of chapter 3. And as much as we want to glorify that song, and oh, that was the voice of the movement of the moment. No, it wasn't. It was man giving up on life in general, which is a lot of people back in the late 60s, early 70s did, as they turned to different hallucinogenic drugs and marijuana and, you know, all the other acids, and a lot of them died from it. A lot of them. Before we knew the power and the danger of those drugs, it was too late for many, many young people who literally threw their lives away. Oh, let's just get high and see what happens, man. We'll stare into a candle for a week. And sadly, the life, not being funny, I'm just saying, sadly, the lives were sacrificed for no apparent reason. And the parents looked at their child and said, how could this happen? Well, I can tell you how it happens. I can tell you, I can give you the exact answer. It's not my answer, it's God's answer. But he says, you know, we're all subject to these kind of influences, forces, and rules. Why? Well, because we call this human nature. And as God is unchanging, he is the same yesterday, today, and forever, so also man is very reluctant to change anything. How many of you old folks are set in your ways about something? You know, this is the way we carve the turkey in this house, mister. You do not put that toilet paper under, you put it over the roll.
Change is good. Change is good.
Only if you're a vendor, change is good.
I used to be very stable in the world.
See, another sick mind, I'm telling you.
But it's in our teenage generation now, you know.
Oh,
Smoke
yeah.
it or just relieve the pain.
Oh, yeah. Well, and that's why the booze manufacturers make so much money, and the drug manufacturers. Now we got a gummy store on every corner, you know, selling this marijuana stuff. And
Yep.
it's all this. People trying to fill this void, and 99.9%, this is my official prediction, 99.9% will say, I don't need all that God stuff. You know, that's just not for me. I walk into church, a roof will fall in. Really, God can kill you in a lot better ways than hitting you with a roof. Unless you're the wicked witch of the West, then tends to drop a house on them. But other than that, they're looking for love in all the wrong places, as the old song used to say. I forget who sang that, country song or something. Looking for love, no. Anyway, that's what's happening. That's what was happening back in the 70s. That's what was happening back in the 40s. Go all the way back to the beginning of time when Jesus showed up. And we don't understand why that little baby had such a difficult time in life. Look what he had to fight. Is there enough Jesus to fill all these holes in us? Now you understand why God's mercy and everlasting compassion is limitless, without end. Because we need it. Not him. We need it. Each and every one of us. And it kills me as a pastor to see people, especially young people. Who needs this God stuff, man? What do you go to church for? Why don't you go to church? Well, because I don't believe in any of that God stuff. Wow. Okay.
Well,
If you can dismiss an almighty God that easily.
The devil's working, Jerry reminded me Friday night. The devil's working overtime to
Oh, yeah.
suck our babies in, and our grandkids and our loved ones and friends.
These are his demons right here. One is, you'll never get it. Why try? You shouldn't be made to work like this. Sit back on the couch and play a video game.
Yep.
And never mind this nonsense. Overtime. Greatest weapon Satan has in his army, I think, is you can do that tomorrow. You can deal with that later. Even though the Bible, from the beginning to the end, says, today if you hear his voice, don't delay like they did in the desert. Don't delay like they did under Paul. Don't delay like they did in the New Testament. Over and over again, it says, today if you hear his voice, today. Because you know what? God's little angel is whispering, you ain't got tomorrow. You got right now. Sermon on the Mount said, seek first the kingdom of God, and all that other stuff will take care of itself. But today, if you hear his voice, respond. All right, look at this chapter. Let's read it together real quick just to refresh all your memory. This is not a great and glorious 70s song. This is a horrible diatribe, if you will, of a man who's given up on life in general. And he's had the benefit of everything. And he's still bailing. And the only one to suffer here will be whom?
He.
Himself. Now remember, this guy's a man of authority, and he makes a declaration. There is an appointed time for everything. And there is a time for every event under heaven. Wow, this guy's really got some references somewhere, evidently. There's a time to give birth and a time to die. We love it when a baby's born, right? We come and we tell them how beautiful the baby is, even though it looks ugly as sin. Oh, that baby is so beautiful. There's no such thing as ugly babies. That's not true. I've seen bunches of them in the ministry. Sometimes I say, we better baptize him now, wash some of this ugly off. Bring some more water, guys. It's going to take a while. And yet, as happy as we are when that baby is born, 90% of us hate having to go to a funeral where everybody's crying and miserable. And same baby grew up to be a wonderful kid, everybody's favorite, and then gets hit by a bus. And now suddenly everybody's, what have we lost? Wait a minute. Then the religionists come in and go, well, he's in a better place now. Yeah, I hope it's not in front of the bus. That is so easily to comfort our souls and to avoid our true responsibility of, what about that character that made that person so fine? Am I anything in its shadow? Am I anything close to it? She took God important. She made Jesus important. She made everybody else in the world important. Where am I in that? That's vanity, to let that pass, that opportunity pass, and not pay attention to it. The body, dead. The name, the memory, that's what we need to study, the character. What can I learn? How many of you have vision or memories of great parents? I do too. My dad was, he was an authority, First of all, he's 6'4", and I was like this big. And I feared him. I stood in awe of him too, but I also feared him. Wait till your father gets up. I knew, I'll start filling out my obituary, Mom. I'm toast when Dad gets here. But my mom was as big as me, which kind of evened the playing field, because she was only 4'8", 4'9", and I was at least that big, so I could get a little, uppity with Mom. But then again, she always had this authority behind her. And I was just waiting. Remember that old movie, The Day the Earth Stood Still? The big iron guy came up, that was my father. And I knew if he came home and he said those words, Chanter. My parents believed in capital punishment. Believed in it very well, mind you. When we lose them, when they die, do we study the character? Where they did so many good things in Jesus. Wait a minute. Nobody's faulting that. I want to know the bigger question, the interpretive question. Why did they do such good things for Jesus? Maybe there's a greater authority determining their life. And it's not something they did. It's who they were. can I be like that? Have I been like that? Have I ever even considered being like that? That's when the life is appreciated. That's when the life is studied and the lesson is learned. This is when God becomes real to us. Not them. They're dead. How can God become real to me now? I might be dead tomorrow. That's the attitude you go to a funeral with. Looking at Job and the end of his disaster, his life, and everything lost. You know, God would have been more merciful if he took out his wife first. Having to put up with her screaming at him the whole time. But what can we learn from that character? How does God see Job? And why is he so proud of him? Nobody else in the Bible is God proud of other than Jesus Christ than Job. How? Why? Tell me the why. What made Job like that? I want to know that. I want to be like that. All right. This guy's, listen to him. Oh, there's an appointed time for everything under heaven. Why even try? It's time to give birth, time to die. In other words, your life means nothing. May as well not even try. Sadly. He's the guy that doesn't want to go to the funeral, and he tells you your baby's ugly. Time to plant, a time to uproot that which is planted. It's time to kill, a time to heal, a time to tear down, a time to build up, a time to weep, a time to laugh, a time to throw stones, a time to gather stones, a time to embrace, a time to shun embracing. A time to search, a time to give up as lost, which he seems to be very good at. A time to keep, a time to throw away. I wish my wife would learn that. A time to tear apart and a time to sew together. A time to be silent. My wife wishes I would learn that. And a time to speak. A time to love and a time to hate. A time for war. A time for peace. What profit is there to the worker of that which he toils? I have seen the tasks which God have given to the sons of men with them to occupy themselves. God stuff. He has made everything appropriate in its time. He has also set eternity in their heart. Yet, so that man will not find out the work which God has done from the beginning even to the end. For I know there's nothing better for them than to rejoice and to do good in one's lifetime. Moreover, that every man who eats and drinks shall see good in all his labor, and this is the great gift of God. I know that everything God does will remain forever. There's nothing to add, nothing to take from it. God has worked it out this way so men would fear him. That which has been already, and that which will be has already been. For God seeks what has passed by. Furthermore, I have seen under the sun that the place of justice, there is wickedness. In the place of righteousness, there is wickedness. I have said to myself, oh, God will judge both the righteous and the wicked man. For a time for every manner, and every deed is also included. I've said to myself concerning the sons of men, surely God has tested them in order to see that they are nothing more than beasts. For the fate of the sons of men and the fate of the beasts is the same. As one dies, so dies the other. Indeed, they all have the same breath, and there is absolutely no advantage for man over a beast. All is vanity. All go to the same place, all came from the dust, and to the dust shall return. Who knows, the breath of man may ascend upwards, and the breath of the beast downward to the earth. I have seen that nothing is better than that man should be happy in his present activities, for that is his only lot. For who will bring him to see what will occur once he dies? That is a pretty sad testimony of this existence which God has given us that we call life. And if you look at God as a perennial loser, so to speak, I mean, he's not creating anything new, he's not doing anything new, it's just what he did for Barbara in the 20s, he's going to do for Faye in the 40s, he's going to do for Lee in the 90s, he's going to do for Robin in the 216s, you know. Well, then what purpose is there to know any of this? What purpose is there to even study any of this? What purpose is there for any Christianity? Well, we call it Christianity, for any religion, put it that way. Why bother? So even when he's failed at the things he knows, he dismisses the things he hadn't even studied yet. Oh, I've seen everything I need to see. Christians are rotten, priests are rotten, pastors are rotten, people in the church are hypocrites, and they're just money, 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 that's all they want. They're no different than anybody else doing this stuff, but at least these people don't try and hide anything. What's the difference? I'll tell you the difference. I can show you the difference, but you're going to have to look with new eyes. Look at this young lady that died over here. Look at her character. Look at her purpose. Ask yourself, what defined this life? What made her act like she acted? And why don't I act that way? What can I learn from this? Because if I learn nothing, then it truly is a tragic loss. I may as well stand up here and sing, do everything, turn, turn, turn. That was the song, remember the song? A time to be born, a time to die, a time to cry, a time to eat pie, you know, a time to whatever. Crying out loud. I hated that song when I was a kid. I wasn't a hippie. Well, I was kind of a hippie. I was a pseudo-hippie. Let my, you know, strict parents. When I went to the University of Florida, of course, no parents. First thing I realized. Catholic Church was nowhere to be seen. No Mass. Or to our Spanish friends, no Mas.
Misa.
Basically, what Tom said was, no authority anywhere. Except the Gainesville police. They got to know me real well. So what did Tom do? Well, Tom became the captain of his ship, the Lord of the Manor. Invincible. No church, no God, no mom, no dad. Just me for the first time in 17 years. I was very young when I went to college. 17 years on my own. I didn't like that song either. But nevertheless, I joined a fraternity. I thought that was the greatest thing in the world to do. It was Animal House in that fraternity. It was fight for my life or die in that fraternity. I got involved in journalism. Well, that's kind of like an English major. What are you going to do with it? Nothing. I got involved in sports. I was good at sports until I got injured. And that ended that career, didn't it? Just like that, my scholarship was gone. Just like that. Track was over. Baseball was over. What did Tom get? A big bill to go to college. So he had to get a job. Where did he get a job? At a local store there in Gainesville. And I worked my rear end, well, most of it off anyway, to pay the bills that were free. See, I failed on a couple of these things. And life suddenly got harder and harder and harder. And then I longed for graduation. Once I graduate, I'll get $1 million job. Wow, was I wrong about that? Really, really wrong. Finally, God, remember God? We were talking about God this morning. The one that I had written off totally and completely. Two things happened in my life, and this is a personal confession. First of all, I met this young blonde. Actually, she came to my fraternity screaming, hollering that her roommate had come over there and hadn't come home, and she was going to find her and kill the man who tried to date her or whatever. And I looked up, I was laying on the ground at the time, we were wrestling some of the guys. And I looked up and I said, I don't marry that woman. She's going to kill somebody. I like that. Well, that was Carol. First words out of Carol's mouth when I said, would you like to go out sometime? She goes, maybe. I said, what is that? First time I ever used that line. Oh, maybe is not an answer. She didn't like it. She still doesn't, by the way, to this day. She gives me a maybe. I go, sweetheart, I know, maybe is not an answer. Why are you still telling me maybe? Anyway, she said, I'll tell you what, I'll go out with you, but you got to go to church with me for 6 Sundays in a row. That was her rule, because she was a churchgoer.
That's good.
She was a churchgoer. And I said, oh, I don't want to go to church. I don't want to go. I went to church every day of my life, from grade baby to grade graduate high school. Every single day in the Catholic schools, your first hour class was
Chapel.
Mass, yes. And these priests came out there, Domine, tu victum et tu spiritus, all of you Italians, keep off of the grass. You know, and oh Lord, not this again. And you had to sing it back in those days. Oh, just to get a woman. Wow, 6 Sundays in a row. Gotta be kidding. About the 5th Sunday, I screwed up and I slept in and I missed Mass. Or missed church with her. She made me start over again. It was like 25 Sundays before that dumb woman would ever go out with me. And even then, our first 3 dates were total disasters. How we ever ended up together was God's amusement, I think. I'll get even with Chanter. Remember how he told Paul or Saul at the time, you have no idea how much you will suffer for my name's sake? Well, welcome. This is your wife. Thanks. Anyway, that was the first thing that happened. The second thing that happened was when I graduated, the Lord presented himself in a different sort of way. In a way that I remember fearing the way I felt when my dad was coming home at 5 o'clock, as he did every day, right on time. A man, he was an attorney, he was a judge, he was huge. He was an ominous presence, and Mom had uttered those words, wait till your father gets home. Well, it was 2 weeks before I was to get married that God showed up and said, what do you think? Am I being punished for something? Chanter, I don't have enough punishments for you. That's the only thing in this universe that doesn't exist, enough of what you deserve. So you better go heavy with the forgiveness stuff and not so much with the give me what I deserve. No, don't say that. If you go to heaven, don't say that. Best thing you could do is just shut up. I'm going to say that for you. Sit there and say, okay, Lord, give me an account of your life, Mr. Chanter. Can I get back to you on that? I'll need some time.
And it seems like all he arrives at most of the time in this is he's trying to avoid punishment or evil.
Sure.
You know.
Well, nobody wakes up normally, in a normal brain. Nobody wakes up and starts stabbing themselves. Nobody wakes up and says, I'm going to eat something I know is going to make me sick. We don't look for discomfort. But again, it influences us, doesn't it? Mm-hmm. If it's too hot somewhere, we go, oh, turn on the air conditioner.
But the avoidance of punishment, you know, is opposite of what you're talking about.
But the avoidance of punishment really is an attempt to preserve your authority. When you think about it. I don't want to be punished because I don't want to admit that that guy's in charge over me. I don't want to admit this guy's better at what he does than I am. So we avoid any detrimental influencing or punishment, whatever you want to call it, simply to preserve ourselves. But see, the problem is ourselves still has this emptiness here. And no matter what we do, whether it's proactive in the term of gathering or not proactive in the term of avoidance, doesn't quiet this longing. We are told there's only one remedy for that. But even he's got it figured out. Well, God does, he's not doing anything new. He's never going to do anything new. What he did for Barb, he'll do for Faye. What he did for Faye, he'll do for Cucaracha. And on it goes. So why should I even get involved and try? Well, Jesus is the God of love, right? And he loves everybody, so he wouldn't send anybody to hell. Why should I have to go to church? Put in my time. I mean, is there so many days I have to go? Is there so many hours I have to put in? So many, Our Fathers, if you're Catholic in your nature. Tom, you have sinned. Go and say 3 million Our Fathers and 5 million Hail Marys, and you'll be absolved. Well, for crying out loud, I spent the first 18 years of my life on my knees saying those 2 prayers. Why? Well, because I was a red-blooded All-American boy. And you know what we say about that? Boys will be boys. What is that, some kind of curse on men? Sounds like it. So if we're going to be boys and we're going to be blamed as boys, why bother? Pretty sad repertoire of one's life right here. Nothing glorious about it all. But there is an acknowledgement of 3 things. 1, the longing or that which is driving him to this perspective. 2, the futile attempt to solve the problem himself. And 3, the acknowledgement that if the problem is going to be solved, it's going to lay beyond my abilities. I'm going to have to bring in a big guy. Now let's look at this little girl's life again. And ask the truer question. Not how did she die, or how did she live, but why did she look like she did? What defined her in order to make that effort? And then the worst question of all, where am I in all of that? Is God important to me? Is my life important to anybody? If I died tomorrow, would anybody care? Would anybody ask the question, what made Tom be like Tom? That'd be a dangerous question to ask, by the way. But the point is, do we even consider a greater way than ourselves? 99% of the people say, don't need. If I can't figure it out, it doesn't need to be figured out. And then you look at our churches that are half empty, and you look at our, the fun and the mockery made on television and all about ministers and priests and, everything everywhere. And sure enough, if anybody screws up even a little bit, who wants national news? Wow. I'm going to tell you something. I don't know, y'all watched the news this weekend at all? I don't watch the news, but I do online things. I don't know if you know this man's name. His name is Dinesh D'Souza. You know him, very conservative man, brilliant man. Brilliant in terms of knowledge and awareness. But he's also brilliant in theological things. Very much so. And I appreciate him because of the level of his study. And just by listening to him and reading him, this guy studied a few words here and there. He made an incredible statement this weekend, and I'm going to tell you about it in the sermon. So order now. It's for a limited time. Incredible statement. And you say, well, Tom, what has that got to do with anything? Well, I'll tell you what it has to do with. Tom suddenly found himself standing over here in the corner going, wow, where am I in all of that? You'll understand what I mean in just about 20 minutes or so. Where am I in all that? There's the bigger interpretive question. Next time you go to a funeral. Next time you go to a birth or a new child born. Ask yourself the why there. How, why is this child born, and how can I influence or affect it? You know what? Our ritual, in the covenant ritual, we say, when we baptize people and when we do confession and stuff like that, I ask you 3 questions. You know what one of the questions are? It is, let's say you guys got a baby and baptized. I say, Faye, Jerry, will you so live your lives such that they become the gospel? You've heard that before. And set for this child an example who will lead him or her to a spiritual life in Jesus Christ for themselves. Do I not ask that question? I do. And then after the baptism of the child or the confirming of the child, I turn to the congregation and I say, this is a privilege and a duty for each of us. And I say to the congregation, will you so live your lives before this child that you become the gospel? If you will, please, with God's grace, we will. And you all say, with God's grace, we will. And you've seen me do that a dozen times. You know why we do that? Because I want you to look at the life. Look at Job. Look at Daniel. Look at Jesus the Christ. Oh, well, he's God. He doesn't count. Sure he does. He suffered everything we do. Now look at this life that's been taken far too prematurely. But is there something precious here that we don't want to miss? Welcome to chapter 3 of Ecclesiastes. Remember, we're looking into the mind of God. And today we see a very huge void of God's character in this life. Question. Ooh, you always hate these questions. Is this our character? Then you'll know why you need all the God stuff, if you answer that question honestly. All right? That's all I got. Chapter 3. It's going to get a little worse in chapter 4. Oh boy, can't wait. So we'll see you next week.